Okay. We are live. JD05. He's first. Good to have you here, my friend. How is it going? Just going to do what we usually do. Get some people in first. I've posted the link in the element, so we should have some people come through. So just give it a few minutes. Let the place fill up, and then we'll get into the topic of today's live stream. Okay, all right, a few minutes. We just had 3 people in the chat. What are we saying, folks? Don't leave me hanging. I'm hoping this one fills up. Okay, we got 3 people. Who we got? Yes, JD. What's happening, man? Who are we going with for Spence Crawford? or are you sitting on the fence? I think this is one of those fights where if you sit on the fence, I don't think anyone can really hold it against you. This is a close one. Crawford UD. Okay. Do you think it'll be close, or do you think it'll be wide? I know I've seen some people going with Crawford confidently, like he's going to win big. Okay. Chat's filling up now. We're getting some more people. All right, for those who just joined, as you can probably tell, this is going to be mostly on Errol Spence versus Terence Crawford. Very exciting fight, one that I think us boxing fans have been kind of clamoring for a long time. This fight really should have happened many years ago, but it's here now, and let's enjoy it. So, JD, you think 7-5 or 8-4 decision for Crawford? Okay. Yeah, chat's filling up, but not much chat. Come on, people, let's get the discussion going. It can't just be me. Okay, so how do you see the fight unfolding? Because obviously those are the rounds. How do you think the early rounds go, the mid rounds, the late rounds? Because I've seen a lot of people actually think that Crawford could get the stoppage as well. And as I say, this is a difficult one to pick. So there are so many different scenarios in terms of what the fight can present. All right, bear with me, folks. I'm just going to see how this link is doing. I want to make sure it actually works. Okay, all right. We're just going to have to make do with this one. Hopefully some more people join. I've got 7 people in the chat. Come on, people, let's contribute. Let's see what we can do. Very much looking forward to this one. I'm kind of in two minds as to whether I should pay for this one and stay up. I am tempted. I'm very tempted. I don't have an issue paying for pay-per-views. Although, just on a side note, I don't think the undercard is particularly strong for this this event, Spence versus Crawford. Box Rec, we have obviously main event, which in my opinion is pretty much that is pay-per-view for sure. But undercard, I guess this is chief support. We've got Isaac Cruz and Giovanni Cabrera fighting for the WBC silver lightweight title and the WBO Latino lightweight title. I like Cruz a lot. I think he's a real entertaining fighter, a real solid fighter. I don't know who this guy is fighting, who is 21-0, only 7 knockouts. So this Giovanni Cabrera, he hasn't fought in over a year now. So haven't seen him, but I'm not too sure. But I do like Cruz. The ancient legend in Nonito Donaire fighting Alexandre Santiago for the WBC World Bantamweight title. Santiago, I also don't know. He is 27-3-5, so he's had a lot of draws in his career. 14 knockouts. Once again, I don't know who he is. And the rest of it, I'll recognize Sergio Garcia. He used to be EBU European champion, wasn't he? At light middle. Yeah. I don't recognize anyone else. So not the strongest undercard, but really tempted to pay for this one. How about you guys? What are you going to do? Are you paying for this one? Because in the UK anyway, it's I think it's $19.95, so it's like standard pay-per-view price. The only thing is, it's obviously in America, so I'm imagining it's 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning, something like that. Anyway, we've got some more comments, so you guys can try and sell it to me in the meantime. JD says, Basted Kid said Crawford wins inside 9 rounds. Could happen. Yeah, you know what? It wouldn't surprise me. I'm not sure if you guys saw, but last year I actually picked Ugas to beat Spence. I thought he'd stop him, not because I really rate Ugas better than Spence, but I just wasn't confident in Spence's condition. Because he'd beaten Danny Garcia in late 2020, and I thought he looked good considering the circumstances. But he was then obviously lined up to fight Pacquiao in I think it was August 2021, and it just there was the detached injured retina. I think it was detached retina that didn't fill me with confidence, and I thought someone like Ugas, who is a bit limited but is really good at kind of his niche, which is that kind of really sharp counter punch, and he shells up well. He's quite tough. I think he's deceptively hard puncher and quite strong physically, your Dennis Ugas. And he actually rocked Spence considerably. But Spence, to his credit, looked like a monster in that one because he was just all over Ugas. Very impressive. I actually did a video, in case you haven't seen it. I did it about 2 weeks ago actually, and it's just a study on how Errol Spence finished that fight. Really, really intense stuff. Okay, so CPT Game 86. I'm guessing you're picking Errol Spence. You want to see Errol turn Bud over? Hey, it could happen. This is one of those fights. JD says, I'm interested to hear how Isaac Cruz looks against that dude I've never heard of before. Ain't a hardcore fan, not a casual either. Yeah, fair enough. Isaac Cruz, I like his style. He's he's one of those short guys, compact, powerful, looks to get stuck in, and sometimes that's all it really takes to get an entertaining fight. Tom Gill, how you doing, my friend? Always thought Spence would win this, although I'm starting to feel the weight is going to take its toll on him as the naturally bigger man. Spence KO in the first 6, otherwise Crawford wins on points. Yeah, okay. I think that's a good point to raise because both guys, I think, Spence, big welterweight. I think Crawford is a good size welterweight, someone who probably still has the potential to move up. But right now, he probably doesn't have to strain himself all that much to make welterweight. So I just looking at face value, so take it with a pinch of salt, I still think that Bud is making the weight much more comfortably than Spence. Now, this is just the eye test, but I think Spence, he looks a bit drawn. He looks quite dry. And yeah, he was probably going to enjoy a decent size advantage in the ring, but it's really like you have to weigh it up. Okay, I may have the size advantage on the night over my opponent, but how much is it going to take out of me to make weight? Because if you're the bigger guy, the stronger guy, the more physically imposing guy, but you're dog-tired because you've just had to spend weeks cutting weight, so much more weight than your opponent, does it really add up to much? Is it really worth it? So, very good point about the weight. There's so many factors at play in a fight that's already, like elite level. So, very exciting stuff. CPT says it's easily the fight of the year either way. Yeah. I think this is definitely the most high profile. I don't know if both guys necessarily have the profile, but in terms of significance, this is a big deal. This is top level. It doesn't get any higher level than this. Undisputed, but also the consensus 1 and 2, or some guys would say 1 and 1, and this is the decider. This is exciting stuff. And CPT, talk about the inactivity of Spence could end up costing him. Yeah, that's not a good sign because he hasn't fought in, when was the last time? It was mid-April last year. So well over a year. like a year and 3 months, nearly a year and 4 months, that's not going to help you in most cases going into a fight like this. When you consider that, if we look at Terence Crawford, um, obviously he fought David Avanesian, was that in December? Yeah, so he's still been out the ring for over half a year. But, would you rather be last in the ring half a year ago or a year and a half ago? It's really a no-brainer. JD, thoughts on Plant slapping Jamal? That's definitely more embarrassing getting punched. I didn't actually see that. I've got to come clean, guys. I've only been in the country, in my country of residence, for the last 3 hours. So I hope you appreciate this. I got off the plane 3 hours ago, and I'm doing a live stream because I haven't had much interaction with you guys recently. Been very busy, and of course away for the past couple of weeks. And of course, this fight it's a big deal. So yeah, forgive me, JD. I haven't actually been able to catch up on much boxing news. I'm really trying to take it all in now. So I mean, face value, this stuff happens. Caleb Plant has always kind of struck me as a bit of a diva, if that makes sense. Like I don't know, like the way he's conducting himself, that doesn't surprise me that he'd do that kind of thing. And Jamal Charlo, he's a bit of a hothead. This is someone who, both the Charlo brothers actually, they're quite animated, they're quite intense. Yeah, I don't really find it surprising, but as I said, I don't know any of the context, so forgive me. Okay, we got pound for pound boxing in the house. Good to have you here, my friend. It's been a while since we've had a chat. You're going with Crawford by TKO. Okay, referee stoppage in round 10 or 11. This will be Errol's last bout at 147. And big up to you, my friend. Okay. How do you see the fight unfolding, though? Do you think it'll be Crawford really getting into the fight from early and just really making a statement in those rounds, or do you think he's going to have to really work to get this? But yeah, Crawford by TKO. Oh, I see your that's a bold prediction. I say that's a bold prediction. But to be honest, I think most predictions are in a fight like this where it could go either way. JD says, I knew Conor Ben was innocent all along. You might want to hold your horses there. I just watched Hatman's video, and he was talking about the statement I think UCAD gave, and it was very ambiguous. So there is still some clarity, some transparency that's required. I don't know. Innocent till proven guilty. All I will say is Conor Ben has probably had the quintessential PR disaster over the past few months. So I don't know. All we want is kind of due process. We want the right kind of process, for lack of a better term, to take place. But none of this ambiguity, none of this he said, she said, 300-page documents that nobody ever sees. We want a resolution to this. So I'm not entirely sure if he's an innocent man just yet, but hey, we've got to see all the facts. JD says, I think Spence has some sort of PTSD caused by that first devastating car crash. Hence why he switched off in his last 2 fights. Can't do that against Crawford. Yeah, and I think he actually confirmed that. I remember it was after the Ugas fight. He said that he thought Ugas had knocked his teeth out. And that was, that kind of sent alarm bells ringing, because some of you might remember in that car crash, Errol Spence actually lost his teeth. He had to have, I guess, veneers put in or replacements. And yeah, he's lucky to be alive, and it's quite extraordinary that he's gone back to fighting at elite level, championship level in boxing. But that is it'll always be a concern of mine because it's just such a, like, imagine the trauma, the physical trauma, the psychological damage of being in a car crash like that and then going into a combat sport where you're going to get hit upside the head. And at this level, man, yeah, that's a red flag in my opinion. And now I give Spence massive credit for beating Ugas the way he did. And even Danny Garcia. Danny Garcia is a good fighter. But as you say, this is a step up. You can't do that against Crawford because Crawford doesn't get the credit for his finishing ability. He is vicious. If he buzzes Spence like Ugas did, oh boy, he's going to go after Spence and he might just melt him. He might tear through him. Like, do you remember? Obviously, Kell Brook isn't as good a fighter as Errol Spence. But did you see when Crawford, who had a little bit of a frustrating time with Kell Brook, as soon as he got him hurt, he just tore through him with vicious punches. Crawford's a mean guy. Both of these guys are complete savages in the ring, Spence and Crawford. But I think with Crawford, in terms of one punch power, I suspect, I could be wrong, but I suspect he's actually a harder puncher, pound for pound, but per punch. I just think he's got that sharpness, that explosiveness, whereas Errol Spence, a big puncher, I'm sure, but it's more constant, where he just chips away at you. And he lands his punches quite cleanly and from early on, which, you know, pick your poison, really. Do you want to get hit once by a guy who's explosive or hit multiple times by a guy who's accurate and consistent? You know, neither one is going to be pleasant. Empathic mimicry. Spence is a master on the inside, but I think taking on Crawford on the inside, yeah, it certainly is. I wouldn't say Spence is a master on the inside, because when I think of a master on the inside, I think of someone like Roberto Duran. I think of someone like even James Toney, who not many people associate Toney with his inside fighting. But they had a lot of nuance, a lot of tricks of the trade that they'd use on the inside. With Spence, I think he's quite, I don't want to say basic, but he doesn't do anything exotic. He doesn't do anything that's like, whoa, wow, like you see that. This guy's a real master, not in my opinion. However, he's big, he's strong, he's consistent, and he certainly has a way on the inside. The only thing is with Spence is I think his overall game is kind of methodical. I definitely agree that on the inside, that's where he prefers to be. That just seems to be his kind of natural inclination. I think at long range, he's, you know, that mechanical nature is even more apparent. But on the inside, he does seem to let go. And his shot selection, Errol Spence's, is phenomenal. Like the way he just chips away, lines up those shots is very accurate. I wouldn't say he has the most commitment in his punching technique. Hence, he's probably not the biggest one-punch guy that often. But technique is very good. It's very solid. And he can just go and go and go and go like a machine. But Crawford, I don't think Crawford's as much of an inside fighter. But if you come into Crawford's wheelhouse, you know, he's got dog in him and he can punch hard. And I have absolutely no doubt that if Crawford lands his best punch clean on Spence, Spence is going to be, you know, knocked for six. So, yeah, definitely dangerous if he disregards Crawford on the inside. Tom asks, are we still getting the best version of both fighters? Don't get me wrong. There is still the fight we wanted this year. It's still the fight we wanted this year, as well as Fury Usyk, Dream On. Yeah, good one. But still wish we got this 4 years ago. Yeah, I definitely understand that sentiment. I think Terence Crawford maybe passed his best ever so slightly, just purely by the fact that he's aged now. I think, Terence Crawford, 35, 36? 35. Errol Spence, I think, is 33. And then Errol Spence has had that car crash. However, I do think we are getting a very good version of each. The best version, I think the best version of Errol Spence was against Sean Porter. Now, a lot of people didn't, at the time, they weren't necessarily that impressed with Errol Spence's performance against Porter, even though he did win clearly. They just thought that Porter maybe had his way a bit too much, and showed some weakness of Errol Spence. I didn't really see it that way. I thought it was a good, impressive performance by Spence against a guy who's kind of renowned for making fights rough and tough for a lot of guys. So I think that version of Spence at September 2019, I actually think the version of Terence Crawford that fought Sean Porter as well, excuse me, that background noise. I think Terence Crawford, who fought Sean Porter back in 2021, was that October 21? Let me double check. Such a casual, I don't know my dates. November 21. I thought that was a really good, really sharp version of Terence Crawford. And I think if we get that version of Terence Crawford tonight, the Terence Crawford that fought Porter, yeah, I'm picking him. I'm picking him over Spence. Yeah, they're close to it, but I wouldn't say it's the definitive best of both fighters. But we have to look back in hindsight. Excuse me. Pound says, look at the Inoue Fulton fight on Tuesday. Fulton had been out the ring for well over a year. It showed with him, in my opinion. Yeah, I've got to check that one out. As I say, I was away for a while, so I'm having to catch up now. JD asked where I went. So I was in Spain, so not necessarily the most exotic place, but I was way out in the sticks. So I didn't have any internet connection for pretty much the entire time, in a very, very small village. It was a family thing. So yeah, I was out there for a little while as well. I think about a week and a half. So yeah, very much needed break. Glad I'm back now. We can get to work and start making some videos. JD says, you strike me as a guy that doesn't cuss a lot. Just trying to stay on the right side of the algorithm. That's all. Other than that, I swear like a sailor. Yimi says, Spence is overhyped and very basic at elite level. Bud destroys him easily. Spence is an inactive drunk who's injury prone and stalled out this fight. You know what? Like, at first, I'm thinking, Yimi, I don't know, man, you're being a little bit, but I understand what you say. I think, just to address your points, I think in reality, any fighter that has a following is going to be overhyped. It's just inevitable. Boxing fans, especially, they don't know how to be balanced. But I do agree. I personally, I think Spence is very basic at elite level, just as you do. Now, I don't know if he's here right now, but J98, I think he's been back in Spence. Jay's been back in Spence for a long time. Me and him have had back and forth. Always really respectful. You know, we keep it objective. It's not about fanboy or anything like that. But I hold that sentiment. I think Spence is quite basic. I think in terms of technique and boxing IQ, I don't even think it's all that close between Spence and Crawford. Crawford, I just think, is really probably the most complete fighter in the division, whereas I see Spence as a very good, consistent and intense kind of bully in the ring almost. Like, you know what you're going to get with Spence. Yeah, he can box on the outside, but it's not his forte. He wants to get in there, mid-range, close range, and kind of suffocate you with offense. And I don't know if he's necessarily had the opponent to really shore up his weaknesses yet. And, you know, people want to talk about opposition. I think Spence has definitely fought the better opposition, but only slightly. Like with Crawford, a lot of people critique his resume, but, you know, he's fought a good few names. And yeah, people are like, oh, but they're not the best of the best. But okay, I think it's established now that Spence wasn't overly, for whatever reason, wasn't overly keen on fighting Crawford, because he was the one that was openly talking about, oh, you got across the street, you got across the street. Um, and obviously insinuating that he's got to come over to PBC. And that was years ago. That was what, 2017, 2018? And then there were the negotiations last year and it didn't happen. And people say, oh, no, it's Terence Crawford. He's making unrealistic demands. But then as soon as Terence Crawford agrees to fight on PBC for what, 2 fights, all of a sudden the fight happens. And then you're like, okay, maybe Crawford was actually the one who was pursuing the fight more so. And it's not to say that Spence is scared of Crawford, but it was obviously some politics at play. And I think the politics probably were almost, I'm not going to say in their entirety, but the majority was coming from Spence's side. But I've kind of lost my original point. I rate Spence, but I feel like he's a bit more niche, whereas Terence Crawford, I think, is much more versatile. And yeah, he's kind of like what you expect from an elite level fighter, to have the massive arsenal of skill and the really refined technique and the high IQ. Maybe Bud does destroy him easily. I don't know. I'd be like, wow, that's a statement if he does. And then, yeah, we know Spence has had some issues with drinking, clearly, in the past. But you just have to watch and find out, I guess, because, yeah, Spence has had these issues in the past, but maybe this fight has made him just really zone in and get back to the kind of old Spence from 2017 when he was gunning for his first world title. Who knows? Injury prone, that's another variable. I personally don't have the most amount of confidence in Spence's physical condition as well as his psychological condition. Not because I see him as a weak fighter, but because of the damage that he took in that car crash. So, yeah, Yimmy, maybe some inflammatory comments in some people's eyes, but I definitely see what you're getting at there. You say 2 inactive guys in their mid-30s, it's past its best as far as quality of the product. Maybe. There's no real way of knowing, I think. However, even if it is past its best, how far past its best is it? Because if it's, I don't know, if you want to put some arbitrary date, if it's 1 year late, which, as I said, I just pulled that figure out of the ether, still not that bad, really. But hey, I guess, you tune in, you don't tune in. If you do, hopefully it's a good fight, nevertheless. But I think it's definitely, it's good that it's happening, because regardless of whether both guys are in their absolute primes, it's a fight that needs to happen in terms of consolidation of titles, and we're getting it. As frustrating as it was to get here, we're here, so we should try and enjoy it. But then I am very much the persistent optimist. Pound for Pound says, angles, combinations, viciousness, that's how Bud gets it done. Errol's jaw, especially after the car crash, will not hold up. Okay. Is anyone, I think we've only got one person picking Spence, from what I've seen. Fight film, how much rabbit did you eat in the campo? Too much. Love me some rabbit. Yimi says, I like Crawford, but I have Monster as pound for pound number 1. Regardless of what happens tonight, Inoue looks much more dynamic, explosive, consistent, and on the rise. Okay, I see what you mean. Yeah, it's undeniable. Monster. Inoue's been making serious waves for a long time now. I think technically I'd still say Crawford, pound for pound, for whatever that's worth, is a better boxer, just in terms of versatility and technique and IQ, as I say. But definitely, I can't argue with that. Inoue is just cleaning people out, and not like pies. He's fighting the guys who he's supposed to fight. He's fighting his contemporaries, and it's not even really close. When was the last time he had a close fight? Was it against Donaire? And look what he did in the rematch. I'm talking about the first on air fight was like somewhat competitive, but then the rematch just cleaned him out. Completely starched him. So, hey man, Yimi, I can't hold that against you. Mike, yes sir. How you doing, man? It's been a while. Good evening. What a night we have in store. Spence in one corner, Crawford in the other. The atmosphere is going to be fire. I've gone back and forth a lot. Right now I'm saying Crawford on points. Okay. Mike, same question to you. How do you see it unfolding? Early rounds, mid rounds, late rounds? What do you think the flow of the fight will be? Empathic, mimicry? Oh, mimicry. Okay, my bad. I'm assuming that you're correcting me in your pronunciation. I don't think much will happen in the first 3 rounds. Plenty of long-range jabs from Spence and Crawford, high guard, keeping distance. Okay, so you think it'll be a quiet opener, maybe? JD asks, "Do I follow MMA?" I don't. No, I'm pretty much just a boxing guy when it comes to combat sports. I do watch some other sports, but when it comes to combat sports, it is pretty much boxing. I very occasionally watch wrestling. Like when the Olympics is on, I watch Greco-Roman wrestling stuff. But other than that, boxing is just my combat sport. Pound for pound, yeah, we spoke about the detached eye, the retina. That's not good, man. Like so many fighters in the past have had their careers cut short because of that very same injury. So, that's red flags, man. Red flags. Fight Film says Spence sells more. Yeah, I agree. Has 3 belts, and Heyman ain't letting him fight on Top Rank. How is inviting Bud's PBC and making concessions in the contract into avoiding the fight? Oh, are you talking about like the fact that the fight isn't happening until now? Well, I don't get me wrong. I get it. Like Spence is a bigger commercial draw. He's been in many more events, which is obviously an important variable. Has 3 belts, and Heyman is not letting him fight on Top Rank. But I don't think that excuses the kind of the stalling of this fight. And now, don't get me wrong. I'm not someone. I don't pay attention to the business of this stuff. I just kind of look at face value. Maybe I'll do a little bit of digging, and it just seemed like Spence's team and weren't as keen on the fight as Crawford's team. And we've kind of seen this pattern with PBC whereby certain fights don't happen. Like, don't you remember there was a time when PBC, I can't remember which one of their fights it was, but it was a few years ago. And they kind of stopped recognizing the WBO title as like a legitimate belt. Like we were back in the 90s or something. And it was like they were trying to undermine Crawford and make out he wasn't a player in the division. And that stank. To me, that stank. Yimi says, Bud's top wins at 147 over Horn, Avanesian, and Porter are similar to Errol Spence's wins in Porter, Danny, and Ugas. Both fought damaged versions of Brooks, so I'll leave that out. Okay, we can talk about this. You know what? Call me crazy, but Jeff Horn, I thought was a decent fighter. Like I didn't see him as being terrible. I thought he legitimately beat Pacquiao. I know this is going back like 6 years, but I thought he legitimately did beat Pacquiao. Avanesian, Euro level fighter, and Porter. The Porter that fought Spence and Crawford, I think is definitely in the same kind of ballpark. I'd say that Danny Garcia and Ugas are better than Horn and Avanesian. And yeah, both fought damaged versions of Brook. But then, yeah, it's when it comes to resumes, because there are some wins that I don't think Crawford has got credit for. So like David Avanesian, for example, Euro level fighter. But Terence Crawford showed that. Terence Crawford showed he was levels above him, completely cleaned him out with one punch after not really losing a single round. Didn't even come close to losing a single round. Porter, I thought that was a very good win. Some people kind of contest the stoppage, and oh yeah, Porter announced his retirement after the fight. But look at how Porter fought in that fight. That looked like a decent version of Porter to me. Kell Brook, yeah, was shot, but once again, after having some slight frustrations, Crawford cleaned him out in the fourth round. Like Kell Brook, if that fight didn't get stopped when it did, Kell Brook would have been cleaned out because those punches were just tearing through him. Kavaliauskas at the time was obviously unbeaten. And yeah, he's lost a couple times since. He's lost to Virgil Ortiz since, but not before rocking Ortiz. And Kavaliauskas is a very tough and sturdy fighter. Might not go on to be a world champion, but he good solid fighter. I think good skills, very physically strong is Kavaliauskas, very sturdy. Amir Khan, yeah, that was a bit of a strange fight to happen, but once again, Crawford just dealt with Khan the way he was supposed to. I know the ending to that fight was kind of bizarre, but Amir Khan quit. Let's be real. Benavidez Jr. unheralded, but Crawford did what he was supposed to do, took him out big time in the last round, and then Jeff Horn. But then we have Crawford's run at 140. Now, I remember watching Crawford at this time when he was fighting Delorme, like Hank Lundy, Victor Postol, John Molina Jr., Felix Diaz, and Julius Ndongo. Yeah, those aren't the greatest level of opposition, but they were Terence Crawford's contemporaries. They were the guys he had to fight, and they weren't even coming close to being competitive with him. So can you really ask for that much more? And don't get me wrong, like, you can only give so much credit for that. But when a guy is fighting the guys he's supposed to, and he's dealing with them in the way that Crawford was, for me, that kind of makes up for it. But Errol Spence himself deserves credit because, fighting Danny Garcia and Yordenis Ugas after that car crash, that's special. And to deal with them the way he did, outboxing Garcia pretty handily, stopping Ugas after having to kind of overcome some challenges, a little bit of adversity. Very impressive. Dealt with Sean Porter in good fashion, although that was a much more competitive fight, I think, than Porter's fight with Crawford. The Mikey Garcia fight, he did what he was supposed to, but that was such a strange fight way back in 2019. Why did that fight happen? Carlos Ocampo stopped him in one round, but Tim Tszyu has just stopped him. Like, we know what level Carlos Ocampo is, and it's not world level. Lamont Peterson, washed up, I think it's fair to say. Kell Brook, closer to his prime than when he fought Crawford, but was still coming off of that Gennady Golovkin fight. And then before that, it was Leonard Bundu, Chris Algieri, Chris Van Heerden, that kind of deal. So, it's, in my opinion, it's a bit of a pick 'em. JD says, I paid for Spence versus Crawford. $19.99 is a good price, and I'll be looking forward to numerous live watch-alongs by various creators. Hey, man, enjoy. I'm still on the fence. I think I'm going to go for it. I'm a little bit tired. I was up at stupid o'clock this morning having to travel home, but I think this is worth it, man. I haven't stayed up to watch a big American fight night in a while. And hey, man, I think we might just have to go for this one. Set the alarm for 2 a.m. or something and tune in. JD says, by the way, I'm 18. I have the privilege of not paying for bills and rent, so I pay. Hey, man, power to you. Like, don't let anyone downplay that. If your parents or your guardians have worked to get into a position where you can do this, maximize it. And I hope you enjoy. I hope tonight is a good fight, and I hope Joshua versus White is a good fight, because ultimately we're boxing fans. We want to be entertained. So we need good fights to entertain us. Yimi, you're replying to Fight Film. Mike says early rounds, I think Spence will be getting the better of it, but Crawford is so good at making the adjustments. His counters are razor sharp, and I think he'll take over in the second half. Okay, interesting. We'll have to see what happens. I'm still kind of formulating my my own prediction. Excuse me. Blimey, there's a bit of coughing fit there. Excuse me. Yeah, I'm kind of delaying it. I'm trying to formulate my own prediction. JD asked what other sports do I like? Football? No, man, I'm not a football fan. I'm a soccer fan. If you're a Yankee, no, the sports that I'm really interested in, obviously boxing. That's like my sport that's really close to my heart. Sport I've invested a lot of time in. But other than boxing, I am quite relatively easy. But I'd say the next level down, I actually like Olympic weightlifting. That's something that I kind of do personally, not particularly well, but I enjoy Olympic weightlifting, doing it, watching it, coaching it. Something I've always been interested in. What else? I like track and field. You know, I follow these. I say track and field. I follow it a bit more loosely. What else? Tennis. I like tennis. You know, very much a casual, but if tennis is on, I'll watch it. I like sports that are quite dynamic, and I know obviously a lot of sports are dynamic, but I like suddenness in a sport. So, like Olympic weightlifting, for example, it's athletes, weightlifters trying to get the bar from overhead, bar from the floor to overhead as the heavy weights as quickly as possible. Very explosive, very sudden. There are some make it or break it moments where a lifter has failed 2 lifts and they got one chance left if they want to qualify for a major competition. And you see them like they get charged up and they just rip the bar from the floor and they make it. Real satisfying to watch, and it's very technical. What else? When I was in Spain, actually, they have this sport, and I've never heard of this sport before, but it's called paddle. Some of you guys may have heard of it. It's a cross between like squash and tennis, where you'll typically have doubles, I think. So 2 on one side of the net, 2 on the other, and they're in like a cage. So it's like doubles tennis, but they can allow the ball to bounce off of the walls around them. And there's actually a doorway in line with the net on the sides of the cage. And some of the crazy plays, like these players, the ball will go over the cage and they run out the doorway, smack it through the other half of the doorway onto the other side. And it's this crazy sport, but it's really, really fun to watch. I don't mind basketball, but that's more of like a professional thing, just because I work with like a fair number of basketball players. So it helps me to analyze it, to work with them. Because watch things for enjoyment, but also watch things for professional development, depending on athletes I'm working with. So yeah, like those are the main sports though. Boxing, of course, track and field, and Olympic weightlifting. Also, I must say I am partial to some women's volleyball, especially beach volleyball, for obvious reasons. But I do actually enjoy playing volleyball myself. It's very, very fun sport. Yumi says, sells more but needed Bud to headline his first big Vegas show and his first big pay-per-view show and his biggest payday and legacy fight. He needed Bud for all this. Spence star power is very overhyped. Okay, I don't know. As I say, I don't really focus on things like that. I'm very much someone who likes to get involved in the nitty-gritty for the most part. But ultimately, this is a very important fight. both these guys need each other. You've got one champion, you got the other champion. They're both seen as the best in the division right now, 1 and 2, 1 and 1, whatever. They go, duke it out in the ring, and that's what we get. Joe said it's true. Says, I think one of Bud's most underrated abilities is to hide the uppercut and combination. That's why he's able to hurt all these guys. I know. Yeah, that's a good point. Bud, I think he's definitely an underrated puncher, but he punches clean as well. Like when Terence Crawford lets those fists fly with any punch, boy, oh boy, you do not want to be in the way of those. JD says, what's your take on obese boxing trainers such as Bomac? I'm not saying I want him gone, but if you're going to train an athlete, you should be in reasonable shape. It's like having an overweight PE teacher. Is there any... I don't think I've ever come across a PE teacher who isn't overweight. It seems to just be part of the... seems to come with the territory of being a PE teacher. But I don't think it ultimately really matters. I get what you mean. Like, even if you're not the athlete, you're working with the athlete in an athletic environment. But ultimately, trainers, like, you're not expected to do the training. You're expected to provide the guidance, be it technical and tactical or even psychological. And if you look at, say, Bomac's track record, I think he's proven himself to be a pretty good trainer. Obviously, time will tell in terms of like, okay, when Bomac retires as a trainer, what will his body of work look like? So I don't think it matters really. It'd become a problem, I guess, if Bomac was like so grossly out of shape where he couldn't even instruct Crawford without being out of breath. Maybe, that interferes with that communication, but I don't think it really matters, to be honest. It'd be good to set an example, but Crawford, do you think he cares whether his trainer is fat or thin? I don't think it really matters. It's like, you can ask the same thing about, okay, what if a trainer has no professional experience? Or what if the trainer was never a world champion? It's kind of in that vein because, yeah, there's a certain amount of experience that you'd need. Like, you wouldn't just pick someone off the street, like any Joe Blogs who just watches boxing to become a trainer. But at the same time, there have been trainers who have never even come close to fighting for a title, but then they go on and they train champions or they create champions from scratch. It's a case-by-case thing, but for the most part, I don't think it really makes a difference. Fight for themselves. There are a lot of divas in the PBC that won't fight each other. Spence fought Ugas, Porter, Danny, Peterson, Brooke abroad. Look how hard it was to make Bud versus Sean. He wanted 8 mil. Pack, Bud equals diva. I don't know. I'm going to leave it at that. Bro, get that alarm set. Undisputed welterweight fight with the best possible. Yeah, all right. You know what? I'm getting there. Yeah, okay. I think I'm going to do it. Phillips got Crawford 10th round knockout. Okay, another person going for Crawford. JD says he's British. Oh dear. Nah, that's cool. It's cool to be British, I guess. Depending on who you ask. I know the American ladies are partial to a Brit, so JD, if you're single, you might be worth you going over to the States. You'd be hot property over there. Mike says it's borderline impossible to call this one. These two are so good that they could have 10 fights and they could all be different. Yeah, it's a close one. JD says worst boxing trainers, Virgil Hunter is garbage. I wouldn't go as far as saying Virgil Hunter is garbage, but I would say that obviously his magnum opus is Andre Ward. But Ward is a very particular style. I think it's quite difficult to pin down the quality of a trainer because you really have to look at the fighters who he's trained. Because there are trainers who work with fighters, and these trainers are magnificent, like real top class trainers, but if they don't have the right guy in front of them to work with, they're not going to seem great. But I do get what you mean. Like Virgil Hunter, I don't think he's got the biggest body of work. And if you look at Andre Ward, for example, I like Ward. You know, he's a fighter who had my respect for a lot of his career, but he was a bit of a compromised fighter, and his style, you know, like, how can I say it? Andre Ward was a compromised fighter, and his style was very conservative. And now that works for him. And that is kind of the Virgil Hunter style, that very conservative, no kind of special effects, very basic, not basic, but nothing exotic. Virgil Hunter, the style he teaches. And that's going to work for some fighters, but it's also going to go quite badly for other fighters. But yeah, I certainly don't see Virgil Hunter as this amazing a trainer who can just make every fighter like a high IQ chess player. I don't see that. But I don't think it's realistic to expect that either. So, you know, take from that what you will. Philip Answer, what do you make of Anthony Yarde's comeback fight? I don't think I actually know who it's against. Let me check BoxRec. I mean, it'd be good. I like Anthony Yarde. I like watching him fight. Be glad to see him back again. Ricky Summers, great. You can obviously kind of gather how I feel about this. I'm willing to let this one slide a bit, just because of, you know, he got flattened by Beterbiev in January. But this has been a bit of a pattern in Yarde's career of fighting Kovalev. Well, no, fighting Travis Reeves, 17-3-2, completely unknown, to fighting Sergey Kovalev, losing to Kovalev, fighting Dex Spellman, fighting Lyndon Arthur, losing to Lyndon Arthur. Like, whenever Anthony Yarde loses, he goes in against a complete pudding. And it's just like, you're not... This is probably the issue. Whereby Yarde, he goes into these high-level fights against Kovalev, against Beterbiev, and to a much lesser extent, Lyndon Arthur, but without having the preparation for it. This is, in my opinion, what's costing him. And the fact that he goes in against Summers, as I say, I'm willing to let it slide a bit more because it's a rehabilitation fight. But Ricky Summers, who his loss to Dan Aziz back in 2021. And Dan Aziz is a good fighter, but if he hopes to go back to world level competition, is that really going to help him? I don't know, but disappointing, but not surprising, unfortunately. I'm guessing Derek James has received Trainer of the Year because he's built up strength since the amateur days and look what he's done. Yeah, you know what? Derek James, I was never like sold on him. I didn't have anything against him. I wouldn't take anything away from him, but he wasn't a trainer that I paid that much attention to. But recently, I like Derek James. I like his stable. I think it's a strong stable, and I think he's really doing some good work, Derek James. So it's going to be interesting to see how all of his guys progress going forward. But I like Derek James as a trainer, and I think he knows a lot about boxing. He strikes me as a guy who is really immersed in it. You know, he's not just training guys to pick up a paycheck. He seems like he's someone who is very much in the corner of his man. You know, excuse me. He's like a kind of all-in trainer. I heard about Fraser Clark. I saw like a little headline about him fighting Dave Allen. Please no. Please no. That's all I'm going to say. Yard needs to fight top 15, 20 guy coming off a loss. Yeah, it needs to be more. It needs to be better. All right. So we've addressed a few comments. Man, I guess I'm going to bring this one to a close now, just because I'm tired. Ideally, I want to get a bit of a rest if I'm going to be getting up early in the morning. Excuse me. To to watch the big one, Spence versus Crawford. For the longest time, I have been siding with Crawford. And bear in mind, my position, both of these guys, I thoroughly enjoy watching, pretty much equally. Like, I've given my take on Crawford. I think he's more versatile. I think he's more skilled. But I certainly see how, or I certainly see the strengths of Errol Spence and how he could beat Crawford. That being said, though, I've always just been a bit more impressed by Crawford and his versatility, his ability, his boxing ability, but as well as his athleticism. I think he's a very dynamic athlete, very powerful, deceptively powerful. And that good marriage of that athleticism and that skill, I think, really sets him apart. Of course, you have Spence, who maybe not necessarily the athlete that Bud is, but definitely a respectable athlete, definitely a very respectable boxer. But it's just a bit more basic, a bit more mechanical. Can definitely, if he imposes himself, if he's able to impose himself on Crawford, I think it's going to be a hard night for Crawford, because Spence really does have elite level pressure. He is just on you like white on rice. But I have to factor in that even though Crawford is older, Spence has that wear and tear. And this isn't hearsay. There's video footage of him doing a barrel roll, to quote what was it, Star Fox, do a barrel roll, doing a barrel roll in his car. What damage has that done to his body? What damage has it done to his mind? And then, of course, 2021, having that detached retina. I think this is a very good version of Spence. And Spence is a phenomenal fighter, but I just think Crawford is just a bit better overall. I'm not sure how this fight unfolds. I suspect, in my mind's eye, I kind of see Crawford maybe using his legs, because he does move very well. I suspect, I'm not sure, that he's probably going to have the greater ring coverage, to quote Dwyer, throwing that jab out. I'm not sure what kind of stance he's going to come out with, orthodox or southpaw. I think against another southpaw, Crawford would probably come out southpaw because there's typically that experience difference. I'm not like Errol Spence. How many southpaws has he fought? Not many. I think the last one was Chris Van Heerden back in 2015. So you could say he's maybe out of practice when it comes to, world level fights against the southpaw. Whereas Crawford, I don't think he's really ever had any problems fighting a southpaw matchup. So I suspect he'll opt to do that, move around, probably look to time Spence with a jab. And I think Spence will probably try and do the same thing, but coming forward, closing down the distance, trying to get his own jab going. I'm having a hard time seeing how it goes from there. But I suspect I see Crawford really taking most of the rounds, maybe having some rough patches when Errol Spence probably is like, you know what, I've got to put my foot on the gas and try to pin this guy down. And I think he probably will have some success. But ultimately, I do see Terence Crawford getting the decision, probably unanimous. And I will say, though, over the past few weeks, I have been toying with the idea of Terence Crawford getting a stoppage. I think that is a realistic outcome, to be honest. But I'm going to give Spence the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to say, even if he does get hurt, I think Spence will be able to hang in there, even if he just tucks up and and Crawford just picks up too many rounds. Not like, oh, they're not convincing, but I think he probably just he just racks up too many. And I think he's going to land the better offense, the cleaner offense that really catches the judge's eye. And I see this being a Terence Crawford unanimous decision. So final few comments, because I've just seen my good friend J9898 says, "What's up, Outmatch? Time is now. Let's go." Yes, sir. Let's go. We've been going back and forth on the winner of this fight for over a year. I think it's been 2 years now. It seems like it's been 2 years. We'll see who ends up being right. May the best man win. Man down, strap season. Okay. You know what? I've got to take my hat to Jay, because he's been on the channel for a long time. And he's, we've gone back and forth, but it's always respectful. It's always educated and objective. He's going Spence. I'm going Crawford. Jay, I don't know how much you caught that, but I'm going Crawford unanimous decision. Although, if I was a betting man, I'd hedge it with a Crawford stoppage. I'm sure you're going Spence. Are you going Spence on points or Spence stoppage? But nevertheless, yes, the time has come. It's going to be an interesting watch, and I'm sure you're going to be there when I do my inevitable post-fight review of this one. But nevertheless, it's good to speak to you, my man. Fight Film says Ward was a cheater and a disgrace to the sport. Football fans still moan about hand of God, but Ward's entire career at the top. It's fake wins. I don't know, I'm going to bring this to a close soon, just so you know, go. But Fight Film, I kind of sit on the fence. Ward was a guy who, as I say, was a compromised fighter. Like, the amount of injuries he had and his style, I look at it and I think, how was this guy able to get these wins at top level? Because I think he did legitimately have some good wins, but I can't disagree with you in the sense that there's an asterisk next to a lot of Ward's wins, and pretty much all his best wins, where there's just that, there's always roughhousing, but sometimes it was just out and out cheating. I picked, and you just have to take my word for this, because I didn't have my channel at the time, and I do, like JD. You say I don't know what the hand of God is. I'm aware of what the hand of God is. I am a football normie, but not that much of a normie. Excuse me. With Ward, I picked him to beat Kovalev on both occasions, and I got my predictions spot on. I picked him to beat Kovalev on points in the first fight. He did. Officially, he did. And in the second fight, I predicted that he'd stop Kovalev in round 7, but I think he stopped him in round 8. And obviously, I don't have an issue with the scorecard of the first Kovalev fight, because all 3 judges gave it to him by 1 round. I didn't think that was too bad, but there was a lot of just out and out cheating. There's that time where Ward kind of falls into, or there were quite a few occasions where Ward fell, quote unquote, into Kovalev, and Kovalev guided his head down. And yeah, maybe it was a little bit excessive where he was holding him down, behind the neck, because that was a little bit of a theme. But then Ward wrapped his right arm around Kovalev's left leg and tripped him up. And then in the second fight, that was the worst stoppage I think I've ever seen in a boxing match, was that second Kovalev Ward fight. That being said, I picked Ward to win, and I think he would have won. However, he doesn't do himself any favors with the low blows. And now there were some legitimate body shots in there, but I think it was 50-50. Half of them were legit, half of them were blatantly low. And then there was one point where I think Ward, he realized that he could time Kovalev with a right hand, really try catch Kovalev out. And then he started to just crash forward. He just let his weight fall into Kovalev so recklessly with his head. And yeah, Ward, in some senses, I give him credit because he clearly, like, he did have a very high boxing IQ, and he was essentially a one-handed fighter. But then on the other side, he did fight like such a complete scumbag at times. So I was actually I was actually going to do a video called Andre Ward: A Divisive Legacy, where I was going to talk about stuff like this because I saw that there was some documentary released about Ward's career and stuff. And yeah, I found Ward to be an extremely frustrating fighter to follow because he was someone who had a lot of talent and, you know, clearly was very skilled, but just didn't do himself any favors, just constantly like fouling um, and just like, you know, it kind of created this culture of, oh, you have to do anything to win. Yeah, I get it. Like, it's an extreme sport, but there are still rules. Excuse me. And I feel like Andre Ward, he really kind of played a big part in popularizing, oh, you just got to do anything to win. Nah, man. Like, yeah, it's fighting. Yeah, it's chaotic, but there are still rules. So yeah, very frustrating. And maybe I will address that video. Maybe I will go through with it. I was going to do like a kind of somewhat deep dive, especially in the latter part of Ward's career, where I think his dirty fighting was at its worst. But hey, that's another topic for another day. I'm going to call it time now. We've been going for well over an hour. Thank you guys for joining me. Excuse me. It's been good to chat to you guys. It's been a little while. I think it's been like 6 weeks since I've done a live. Yeah, look, we've got a big fight tonight. Wherever you stand, whether you think it's past its best or whether you think it's exactly the right time, let's just try and enjoy it. Boxing this year hasn't been great for us fans, but let's be positive. Let's enjoy it while it's here. And I guess I'll see you guys on the other side of the fight, and hopefully it's a good one. And I hope you guys enjoy. So take it easy, fellas, and I'll talk to you all very soon.